Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 51. Buddhiya Vishuddhaya Yukto Tritya Manam Niyamacha Shabdadin Vishayam Styaktva Raga Dvesha Viyudasya Cha Vivikta Sevilakvashi Yata Vakaya Manasaha Dayana Yoga Paro Nityam Vairagyam Samupashritaha Ahankaram Balam Darpam Kamam Krodam Parigraham Vimuchya Nirmaha Shanto Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate.
Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of sense gratification, being freed from attachment and hatred, one who lives in a secluded place, who eats little, who controls his body, mind, and power of speech, who is always in trance, and who is detached, free from false ego, false strength, false pride, lust, anger, and acceptance of material things, free from false proprietorship, and peaceful, such a person is certainly elevated to the position of self-realization.
Text 54. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Na Sochati Na Kankshati Sama Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param.
One who is thus transcendently situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me.
Text 55. Bhaktya Mam Abhijananti Yavan Yashchashmi Tatvataha Tato Mam Tatvato Gnatva Vishate Tat Anantaram.
One can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of God, Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me, by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God.
Text 56. 6. Sarva karmani api sada kurvano madhya prashriyaha mad prasadat avapnoti shashvatam padamavyayam.
Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace.
Text 57. Chetasa sarva karmani mai sanyasa matparaha buddhi yogam apashritya machita satatam bhava.
In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me.
Text 58. Machita sarva durgani matprasadat tarisyasi atha chetvam ahankaran nashosyasi vinakshasi.
If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost.
Text 59. Yat ahankaram ashritya nayotsya iti manyase mityashe vyavasasyaste prakritiштvam niyukshati.
If you do not act according to my direction, excuse me, and do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare.
Text 60. Sabhava yena konteya nibatta svaiva karmana kartum nechasi yan mohat karishyasi yavasopitat.
Under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by the work born of your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti.
Text 61. Ishvara sarvabhutanam hriteshe rujanatistati brahmayan sarvabhutani yantrarudani mayaya.
The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjun, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated as on a machine made of material energy.
Text 62. Tam eva sharanam gacha sarva bhavena bharata tat prashadat param shantim stanam prapsyasi shashvatam.
Ocean of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace and the supreme and eternal abode.
Text 63. Iti te gnanam akyatam guyataram maya vrimrishyaitat asheshtena yatha chasi tatha kuru.
Thus, I have explained to you knowledge still more confidential. Deliberate on this fully and then do what you wish to do.
Text 64. Sarva guyatamam bhuya shrinuma parapammachaha ishtosima tridamiti tata vakshyami te hitam.
Because you are my dear friend, I am speaking to you, my supreme instruction, the most confidential knowledge of all. Hear this from me, for it is for your benefit.
Text 65. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru mame vashyasi satyam te pratijani priyosi me.
Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend.
Text 66. Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarva papebhyo mokshayasyami masucha.
Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. I shall deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear.
Text 67. Idam te natapakshaya napaktaya kadachana na chakshushrusavevacyam na cha mamyo vyashuyati.
This confidential knowledge may never be explained to those who are not austere or devoted or engage in devotional service, nor to one who is envious of me.
Text 68. Yaitam paramam guyam madbhakteshvapitashyati bhaktim mai param kritva mam evyashyati asamshayaha.
For one who explains this supreme secret to the devotees, pure devotional service is guaranteed, and at the end he will come back to me.
Text 69. Na cha tasman manushyeshu kaschin me priyakritamaha bhavita na cha me tasmat anya priyataro bhuvi.
There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear.
Text 70. Adyashyate chaya imam dharmyam samvadam avyoho gnana yaknena tenaham ishtas siyam iti me matihi.
And I declare that he who studies this sacred conversation of ours worships me by his intelligence.
Text 71. Shraddhavan anusasya shinuyat apiyo naraha somi mukta shibailokan prapnuyat punyakarmaram.
And one who listens with faith and without envy becomes free from sinful reactions and attains to the auspicious planets where the pious dwell.
Text 72. Kachit etaj chutam partha tvayeka chetasa kachit agnana samoha pranastaste dhananjaya.
O son of Pritha, O conqueror of wealth, have you heard this with an attentive mind? And are your ignorance and illusions now dispelled?
Text 73. Arjuna vacha nashto moha smiti labda tvat prasadan maya chitya stitosmi gata sandeha karishye vachanam tava.
Arjuna said, my dear Krishna, O infallible one, my illusion is now gone. I have regained my memory by your mercy. I am now firm and free from doubt, and am prepared to act according to your instructions.
Text 74. Sanjaya vacha itiyaham vasudevasya parthasya cha mahatmanaha samvadam imam ashrosham abhutam romaharshanam.
Sanjaya said, thus have I heard the conversation of two great souls, Krishna and Arjuna, and so wonderful is that message that my hair is standing on end.
Text 75. Vyasa prasadach shruttavan etat kuyam aham param yogam yogeshwarat krishnat sakshat kathayata swayam.
By the mercy of Vyas, I have heard these most confidential talks directly from the master of all mysticism, Krishna, who was speaking personally to Arjuna.
Text 76. Rajan samshritya samvadam imam adbhutam keshavarjuna punyam rishyami cha muhurmuhu.
O king, as I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I take pleasure, being thrilled at every moment.
Text 77. Tacca samshritya rupamati abhuttam hare vishmayo me mahan rajan rishyami cha puna puna.
O king, as I remember the wonderful form of Lord Krishna, I am struck with wonder more and more, and I rejoice again and again.
Text 78. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno Yatra Partho Tanurtaraha Tatra Shir Vijayo Bhuktir Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama.
Wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will almost certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion. Hare Krishna.
Om Tat Sat iti Srimad Bhagavad Gitashu Upanishatsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastra Shri Krishna Arjuna Samvade Moksha Sannyasa Yogo Nama Ashtadasha Ayatyaha. Hare Krishna, please forgive my mistakes. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much. I just wanted to check you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you, Jai Shri Mataji, and thank you, Pramila, is it?
Yes,
Yeah,
Prabhuji.
Pramila Ben, yeah, you both recited so nicely. For those of you who joined in, that was Jai Shri Mishra's first time she recited the Sanskrit shlokas and she spoke them so nicely. So hopefully, Jai Shri and Pramila Ben, you can do the shlokas again and recitation. So today's verse was Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 58. I just do a new share for you. Okay. Okay, just wanted to check. Can you see that verse?
Yes,
Yes,
Prabhuji.
Yeah,
yes,
okay,
Prabhuji.
thank you. So it's Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 58. Magchitaha sarva durgani mad prasadat tarishyasi atha chetva mahankaram na shoyasi vinaksyasi. Translation word for word. Sorry. Mat of me, chitta being in consciousness, sarva all, durgani impediments, mat prasadat by my mercy, tarishyasi you will overcome, ata but, chet if, tvam you, ahankarat by false ego, na shroyasi do not hear, vinakshyasi you will be lost. Translation. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. A person in full Krishna consciousness is not unduly anxious about executing the duties of his existence. Sorry, 1 minute. Sorry, I have to apologize. He always looks forward, looks after his friend's comfort. Sorry, I'll just read that sentence before. For one who acts in Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna becomes the most intimate friend. He always looks after his friend's comfort and he gives himself to his friend, who is so devotedly engaged, working 24 hours a day to please the Lord. Therefore, no one should be carried away by the false ego of the bodily concept of life. One should not falsely think himself independent of the laws of material nature or free to act. He is already under strict material laws, but as soon as he acts in Krishna consciousness, he is liberated, free from the material perplexities. One should note very carefully that one who is not active in Krishna consciousness is losing himself in the material whirlpool, in the ocean of birth and death. No conditioned soul actually knows what is to be done or what is not to be done. But a person who acts in Krishna consciousness is free to act because everything is prompted by Krishna from within and confirmed by the spiritual master. Translation once again. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. Jai, I will recite the invocation prayers. By all means, all of you can follow at home. Om Gyana Timrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tatati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shivashakavitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Ivacha Patitana Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna, Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Charu Swami Tinamine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Dear devotees, could you just excuse me 1 minute? My wife's just left her phone in my room and it keeps on ringing. I just put it outside. Hare Krishna. Thank you. So this particular shloka, the verse is very important. There's two particular words in here, three words which are very important. Chittaha, being in consciousness. As you know, everything that pervades within our body is a symptom of the soulish consciousness itself. So whatever desires we have, whatever we like to do, is based on the consciousness, the feeling, and the willing within the super soul, within the soul. The other important word in the shloka is ahankarat. Ahankara is false ego. Everything around us is covered by false ego itself. It is false ego that prevents us from understanding our pure natural consciousness, our eternal consciousness with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And the other verse, the other word was Mat Prashadat. And as we know, prashad, we always use the word prashad whenever we're offering anything to Krishna, it becomes prashad. That is the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So whenever we take that prashad, we become purified because the food itself is sanctified. But whatever we do, whatever devotional service we perform, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dashyam, Sakyamatma Nivedanam. Those are the 9 processes of devotional service. Whatever we're doing, we're actually receiving prasad, Krishna's mercy. So when we're actually reading even the book, the Bhagavad Gita, because it is absolute, it is non-different from Krishna. Krishna is the absolute truth. It's one of the 3 aspects of Bhagavan. It is actually non-different from Krishna, so it becomes prasad itself. There's another verse that earlier on Jayshree was reading, verse 55. And that verse talking about consciousness of ourselves. Quickly read that to you. That's chapter 18. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yashtasmi tatvadaha tato mam tatvato gyatva vishate tatantaram. The translation, one can understand me as I am, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of me by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. So here is a conclusion to what Krishna is actually saying in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. When one is in full consciousness of me, but as you know, there's so many obstacles in our life, there's so many impediments that's coming towards us in different directions, not only in a material way, but also in a spiritual way as well. So it's important that we actually learn how to overcome those obstacles. So there's 3 types of miseries that we're all facing. Does anybody know what type of miseries those are? The threefold miseries?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. It's
Yep,
Adi Daivik, Adi Bhautik, and Adi Adhyatmik.
that's very good. Is that Rupa?
Yes, Hare Krishna, my
Hare
humble
Krishna.
obeisance.
Humble obeisances to you. Rupa, could you explain which each of the word means and what their suffering
Yeah.
refers to? Can you
Yeah.
remember?
Yes, Adi Bhautik means miseries caused by the Bhautik means the material, other living entities. Is
That's
it?
right. It's a cause of other living entities. It's the interactions we
Yeah.
have with one another.
Yes, Adi Devik means natural calamities,
And who is that
and
caused
misery
by?
caused by
The
natural calamities,
and
like earthquake, volcanoes, or something.
yeah. So it's actually created by the demigods, and the reason behind that is because we are not performing our prescribed duties, but we are not offering due respects to the demigods. Although we offer our respects to the Supreme Lord, but indirectly that's by performing sacrifices to the Supreme Lord, Sankirtan Yagya, the demigods are pleased. And by the demigods being pleased, they provide all the necessities in life. But if we don't, then unfortunately we have calamities, earthquakes, hurricanes, famine, drought. Yes, carry on, Rupa. And the last one was
Yeah,
Adhyatmic.
Adhyatmic is by our own mind and body.
Yes, that's very good. Thank you, Rupa.
Thank you,
Uh,
Hare Krishna.
And then on top of that, there's other sufferings as well. As we know, we've covered several chapters on the three modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Even in the mode of goodness, is considered to be the cause of lamentation in our life. From the highest planets in the earthly kingdom to the lowest planets are all places of misery, Krishna tells Arjuna. So you've got goodness, passion, and ignorance, and also there is birth. From the moment you're born within the womb, if you've read the Srimad Bhagavatam, it explains about the embryo within the womb that is constantly being bitten by the tiny, I suppose you could call it worms within the womb itself. And the baby is suffering so much and is actually asking Krishna, Krishna, please allow me to remember you. Please allow me to, overcome this material suffering which I'm facing. So there's birth, old age, disease, and ultimately death. That's just the place we were trying to avoid, or go to a place where there's no death at all. And of course, we got the three modes of material nature, which I mentioned: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But on top of that, we also have other obstacles in our life. We have our own conditioning. We have a health consideration. Sometimes we're in anxiety. Sometimes there's a financial obstacle in our life that's causing us distress unnecessarily. There's anxiety or obstacles through our own progress in our day-to-day work at home. So these are some of the things that we need to overcome. And by overcoming these obstacles, it does not necessarily mean that you're going to be completely on the level of pure peacefulness. Prabhupada explains that Krishna consciousness is not a religion of utopia. Utopia is a word that's used where there is complete peace, harmony. There's no miseries or suffering, no violence, no war. Of course, there's always going to be calamities in our life, but Krishna consciousness allows us to overcome that situation that's always the situations that we're always encountering every day. The important thing is learning how to attain that devotional service, how to overcome those obstacles itself. So even in spiritual life, we may have a lot of difficulties as well, which I'll come later on when I talk more about Srila Prabhupada's difficulties when he was preaching about Krishna consciousness to the West. So as yeah, the other obstacles in our life is also the six enemies that we have within ourselves. Does anybody know who the six enemies are within the body?
Is it calm, crowd, lust, anger, greed, uh, false ego? I don't know. I know
Very
lust,
good.
false
Yeah,
ego, and what's the
yeah,
other? Can't remember.
yeah. No, that's
Sorry.
good. So it's anger, lust, greed, pride, illusion, and envy. Those are considered six enemies, and those are I suppose anger, lust, and greed are the three gates leading to hell. And Krishna tells Arjuna that one must try and avoid these, for they lead to the hellish planetary system itself. So we have those six enemies within ourselves that we have to overcome, and also there's the senses as well. The senses are always agitated in every way. We're always hankering for certain things in our life. So that's why it's important that we don't create the obstacles ourselves. Sometimes you may see a lovely plate of prashadam Mahaprasadam, and you may feel selfish, oh, let me eat it all by myself. But because of our consciousness, we know that we have to be practical about our own life, our own health. We just take what was needed. In fact, many devotees may actually come to a situation where they've actually served the devotees and only had a little morsel of Mahaprasad, and they feel satisfied within their hearts, within their, the whole body seems to be purified and happy and joyful and blissful. And the reason behind that is because when you serve the Vaishnavas, automatically your heart is fulfilled. So it's very important that some of the obstacles we can try and avoid straight away. So Rupa Goswami in his Rupa Lila Upadeshamrita, the Nectar of Instruction, he actually explains some of the symptoms that causes obstacles in our life and our path to Krishna consciousness. I'll just quickly read that to you. Sorry, it's just been covered by the task by the top. Okay. This is from Upadeshamrita, the second verse. Atyahara prayashyascha prajalpa niyama graha jana shangascha lolyam cha sadbe bhakti vinashyati. So the translation, one's devotional service is spoiled when he becomes too entangled in the following 6 activities. 1, eating more than necessary or collecting more funds than required. So once again, earlier on, you see an ice cream and you feel like it's a beautiful sunny day. Oh, let me have another ice cream. But the second time you have that ice cream, it's not as satisfying as the first time. Sometimes we can collect funds more than what we require. That's not only just money, but it could be also material possessions as well. Sometimes you may desire to have more and more of something that actually has no significance in your life, no value, because at the time of a situation when we have to move on into our next life, we're going to leave all those things behind us. So it's better that we actually control how much we have within our own comfort life as well. Just have something which is favorable towards pleasing Krishna and his devotees. 2, over endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to obtain. Sometimes we become overzealous of achieving something because somebody else may be very popular, very famous, good speaker, good actor, or a good singer. We try and feel that, okay, well, this person can do it, I can do it, or I can do it better. And that's where pride, illusion, envy comes in. And what happens when envy comes in? Ultimately, anger takes over. It is lust only, or which is the cause of our lamentation in this material world. And from that lust, anger arises. From anger, delusion of the memory. And when memory is deluded, intelligence is lost. Once intelligence is lost, one again falls down into this material pool. So refraining ourselves, trying to compete with other people is very, very important, because you're becoming very selfish in your nature that you think you can do better than somebody else. Sometimes you can do it from a spiritual perspective. Like, for instance, if you're going up book distribution, you can have a spiritual challenge. Oh, this particular group, they distributed so many books. Let me please my spiritual master. I'm going to please him by distributing so many books, because your desire, your endeavor, it's not so much personally for yourself. It's actually to please Srila Prabhupada, and ultimately is to please Krishna. For Krishna, he says, there's no one more dear to me than one who spreads the glories of my pastimes, my glorifications, my my personality in of name, form, and activities. And 3, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters. I think we all do that, a bit of jalpa, prajalpa. So we have to try and avoid that. These become obstacles in our life, because sometimes you may find a situation where you may be with somebody who's not always so productive in their spiritual life. They can be very negative. Oh, did you hear about so and so devotee? He's not chanting his red. He's not been able to follow the 4 regulative principles. But somehow or another, we have to understand that Maya is very strong. We have to control ourselves. Almost have to the point where we have to put blinkers in our own mind and senses to say, look, let me see if I can help this person who's going through a very difficult situation in their life. Okay, in practicing scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them, not for the sake of spiritual advancement. And that's something that we tend to follow in our process in devotional life. At the beginning in our spiritual life, we become very, very enthusiastic. We become very dynamic. We become very proactive. We want to learn so much about Krishna consciousness. But it's almost like an airplane taking off. We're all excited, ready to go on our next journey, our next destination. But somehow or another, when the plane goes to a point where it's very stagnant, it doesn't feel like it's moving at all. You become a bit disappointed. Hang on a minute. I was so excited at the beginning. I loved chanting. I loved being with the devotees, but I don't seem to be going. But sure enough, this plane is still going to its destiny. There are turbulences along the way. There are difficulties, but you must try and still carry on in your sadhana. It's so important, and not just following these scriptures just for the sake of following them. Of course, there's some spiritual benefit, but ultimately, when you're actually following the regulations for spiritual purification, that's when Krishna steps 100 steps forward toward you. You may step one step towards Krishna, but Krishna steps 100 times more closer to you. 5, associated with worldly minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness. So once again, we all have that difficulties at work where people are just talking about mundane situations, about football, about what's on TV, about the opposite sex, so many things which are not really relevant in our life as well. But somehow or another, you have to almost like disassociate with them, but not at the same time be ignorant about them, because you have to understand Krishna is in the heart of every living entity. So you may be trying to aim to be a devotee, but the other person who's a kami, the only difference between a kami and a devotee is that the devotee has a desire of high intelligence that he wants to surrender to Krishna. Whereas a kami, they don't have that intelligence at this stage. But of course, as we know, the super soul within the heart of every living entity is pure. So therefore, Krishna within that person is also a living entity, which is not different from Krishna. Being greedy for mundane achievements. So once again, that's similar to over endeavoring for mundane things. So these are the important obstacles. So once again, when we talk about removing all the impediments or obstacles in our life, we have to try and avoid not only accumulating the things that we have already, but prevent ourselves from accumulating further things by ensuring that we always associate with devotees, carry on with our sadhu, sastra, and association with our spiritual master. Otherwise, this planet, as well as Dukkalaya, Ashvasatam. Dukkalaya means misery, and Ashvasatam means temporary. This world is temporary, but it's always full of miseries, unfortunately, from the moment you're born to the moment you die. So, what is those miseries that we discussed early on? We mentioned about the threefold miseries, the six enemies, the goodness, passion, ignorance within our life, birth, old age, disease, and death. So we have to try and avoid the miseries by taking to the spiritual realm in our uh, activities. Um, so one of the things I wanted to also mention about earlier on, I mentioned about taking our steps towards Krishna consciousness. Every step that we take is a danger toward, or is a step towards danger. So this particular verse, which I managed to, just quickly find from Srimad Bhagavatam, is a very nice verse. It's from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 14, verse 58. Translation, the Sanskrit goes, Shama Shita Pada Palava Plavam Mahatpadam Punya Yasho Murari Pavam Buddhi Vatsa Padam Paramam Padam 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 Yadvipadam Natisham. If you notice, the word Padam mentioned several times, and that means steps. So the translation is, for those who have accepted the abode of the lotus feet of the Lord, who is the shelter of the cosmic manifestation, and is famous as the Murari, the enemy of the Murara demon, the ocean of the material world, is like the water contained in a calf's hoofprint. The goal is Parampadam, Vaikunta. the place where there is no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. So Vaikuntha means the place of no misery, and that's where we try and emulate that spiritual atmosphere wherever we are, whether it's in the hellish planets, in the earthly planets, or Vaikuntha planets itself. We try and ascertain that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, and we are just servants of Krishna. The miseries of the material world, whatever activities are considered or going on in the material world, are considered. When you look at a calf, the size of a calf is a very small size, and the footprint or the hoof print of it is covered in water. And that tiny particle of water within the hoof print is considered to the material world, whereas everything surrounding it is referring to the spiritual world. So although in our mind we go through so many difficulties, so much suffering, and you think, well, why is it happening to me? This pandemic, when is it going to end? I've lost so many close associates, family members, relatives. Why is it happening? Unfortunately, many things is beyond our sort of judgment, and only Krishna can answer those kind of questions. But we can understand from scriptures that ultimately any person or individual, due to their piety in the previous life or impiety, has to go through this process of birth and death. And Krishna is ultimately the witness of everything. So it's important that every step we take a step towards Parampadam. Param means the supreme, the primeval, Vaikuntha, and not a step towards danger. So the more steps you take towards the mature life, it allows or entices you to danger, the material entrapment. Whereas a step towards the devotees to Krishna allows you to go to the spiritual realm. So this is very important that we must all try and do our best to follow. Um, so earlier on I mentioned about Srila Prabhupada. As you know, the Srimad Bhagavatam is all discussions about topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and in particular with his devotees, the demigods. And what is happening to all the devotees and demigods? They're all going through a stressful situation. They're all getting into some trouble with some demon. And who comes to their assistance? Who comes to protect them? It's none other than Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. So these Srimad Bhagavatam stories, and even like this, the Bhagavad Gita, Song of God, this Arjuna is going through difficulties. There's an obstacle. There's all this situation where he has to fight his own enemies, who are his own cousins, his father, his guru. It's like an obstacle to him. He doesn't want to do it, but Krishna is telling him that it's your duty, it's your dharma, it's your righteous situation to actually become a Kshatriya and fight all these enemies to uphold Dharma itself. So when you look at Srila Prabhupada, when we look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes you may think, well, you know, the Pandavas or Arjuna, the celestial beings, they had the Supreme Lord to protect them. You know, I mean, they may be just like stories that we all sort of maybe historical stories, but what about here now when it's present? How do we know Krishna is there protecting us? How do we know that he's taking care of all the obstacles that we are facing every day in our life? So we only have to look at Srila Prabhupada's Leela Amrita. We understand what Srila Prabhupada went through. So many difficulties in his life from his early age to his mission on going to America. He didn't have anybody to support him. He was single-handedly tried to establish preaching Krishna consciousness in India. His family didn't support him. He lost his business. It actually got burgled as well. And basically, wherever he was going, he was facing difficulty after difficulty. Wherever he stayed, the accommodation where he was staying was taken away. He actually had an opportunity to start a League of Devotees in Jhansi, but when the popularity of this particular League of Devotees started progressing, the landlords or landlady decided they wanted to take it away from Srila Prabhupada. So they took it away from him. So Srila Prabhupada had to start from square one again. So these are the difficulties that he was facing. But he was so determined, Srila Prabhupada, that he just wanted to follow the divine instructions of his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. even to the time of trying to get the passage to America was so difficult. He was refused so many times by Sumati Maharaji, who, of course, she was concerned about Srila Prabhupada's old age, his health. When he goes to America, it's like a different world to them. Everyone's materialistic. There'll be nobody to take care of him. And that was exactly what it was like on the cargo ship, the Jaladuta. He traveled for 40 days on the ship, full of turbulence, and all sorts of different weather he had to face. And on top of that, 2 heart attacks. Even in America for the first year, he struggled so hard. And it was recorded in New York when he stayed there during the winter times. They had the coldest winter that they had faced for many, many years. So many inches of snow had prevailed to the entire city of New York. And if you look at those pictures of Srila Prabhupada, he hardly had any thick uh, clothing on him to wear. He was still using his walking stick to walk in the snow, which was so many inches high. And then eventually, of course, Srila Prabhupada started the Hare Krishna movement through his very loyal devotees in America who spread the movement throughout the world. And then when he came back to India, he became even more successful because the Western devotees came there in India and they saw the situation. Well, these are amazing Vaikuntha devotees, Prabhupada, as he used to call them, my dancing white elephants. And that had a real impact onto the Indian community in India. And all of a sudden, Krishna consciousness started expanding so rapidly in different places of India, Bombay, Mayapur, Vrindavan. So these are some of the stories that we face in our own challenges. What I'm just going to do, I'm just going to ask anybody if they feel they have obstacles in their spiritual life, and if they've been in a situation where they've prayed to Krishna or somehow or another overcome those difficulties, or are still facing those difficulties and perhaps looking for ways of actually seeing how they could overcome these difficulties. Does anybody have any good examples they could share with anybody at all? Nobody's had any difficulties at all. Absolutely none. That's amazing. Okay.
Hare
You're all
Krishna Prabhuji.
Paramahamsas. Jai Shri,
No, no, I'm not.
yeah,
I have lots of difficulties.
yeah,
I just wanted to say that when I have difficulties, and obviously we can only pray to Krishna because he's the only one that can help us really. I find that he answers through his devotees.
yes.
So a devotee will say something to me, and it's answering the question that or the problem that I've been thinking about. Or sometimes there'll be a class, and it will be mentioned in the class.
That's really true. Yeah, Jai Shri, because sometimes when you listen to a class, you think, oh my gosh, the speaker's speaking to me. He knows my difficulties. And I've had that situation, and many people in the class have said, oh, wow, this class was really relevant to me. Yes, the Vaishnava Association is so, so important. I have to admit myself, at the beginning, the lockdown was great, staying at home, working from home. But then being away from the temple for 3 months was a real anxiety, especially when you had regular service. Like myself, I do Pujari service at Soul Street Temple, and having that opportunity being taken away from you, you sort of think, well, there's a void in your life. How can I fulfill it? And sometimes that instructions of the devotees, the importance of the Vani and the Vapu, the instructions of the devotee are far more important than the Vapu, of course. But being human beings, sometimes we need that comfort, that one-to-one association, somebody to smile at, somebody to give you a hug or say, you're doing very well, keep it up. Because instructions itself, although they're absolute, sometimes we do have difficulty in maintaining those instructions on a regular basis. So yeah, devotee association, Joshua, is very important that you continue. And if you have a mentor as well, that's very important because
Yes, yes, Prabhuji.
particular. Oh, you do. That's good.
Yes.
Oh, that's great. Because what happens with the mentor system that they've established, it allows devotees of not only the new generation, but the older generation to still uh, participate in Krishna conscious activities, even like attending this regular chat programs on a daily basis and the other School of Bhakti programs which are available, and also the other programs, Zoom programs and um, sessions that are available with all the spiritual leaders of ISKCON around the world. It's very important that we all try and do as much as we can to participate in this. Thank
Yes,
you,
thank you.
Jayashree.
Thank you,
Thank
Prabhuji.
you. Anybody else would like to say anything? Any difficulties they've had in Krishna consciousness? Now Krishna's came to save them in a certain way through different mystic ways.
I have a daily occurrence of how am I going to get through all my appointments
Have
and
you have you booked
at,
have you booked
at
my
work.
appointment too?
Sorry?
Have you booked my appointment too, Jolie?
Yes, no, there's no room. So anyway, what I do, I call on Krishna, I just call his name. And you know what? There's so many people automatically cancelled, and every day there's that anxiety to start with, and then you just dissipate because Krishna is showing me the way. He's helping me, and we never used to. I never used to think that that will work, but I have evidence in my own life about it. So it's really, really useful to think of Krishna, and he's there for us all the time, but we don't recognize it. We're in his heart all the time, but we don't place him in our heart enough, really. And I'm a culprit. It's hard for me to remember him all the time, but that's what I'd like to achieve, actually.
No, that's very good, Jolie. Sometimes writing a journal as well is very good because many activities that we've done, we're going to face those challenges again and again later on in our life. And it allows us to say, well, this is what I did in this particular situation, and this is what I did in another situation. But, and also it allows you to progress on a daily basis. Just like at work, you have like a personal development plan with your manager. The manager wants to say, hey, Jolie, what have you done? What is your achievements over the last week, 6 months? Have you met your targets? Have you met your, competencies and so forth? Were you proactive? Were you accountable? Were you, so many things. So sometimes in Krishna consciousness, it's not just about chanting 16 rounds and following the 4 regulator principles, but it's actually progressing one step further at a time. As I mentioned to you in this verse, the goal is Parampadam, Vaikuntha, where there are no material miseries, not the place where there is danger at every step. So every step, sometimes we may think, well, I'm moving sideways, Jolie, but I'm going backwards. But actually, Krishna is always making one step towards you and all his devotees. But but another example is like now I'm going back to work, and even though I'm listening to Krishna conscious music, and there's traffic jams, and I'm going, oh, blast, there's traffic jam. But I keep forgetting that this traffic jam is there because of karmic reactions anyway, because we're living in this material world. But also I have to remember that Krishna is in the heart of every person seated in that car who's also going through that traffic jam as well. So what makes it any better for me than somebody else? That traffic jam shouldn't be there. We all have to face these challenges, unfortunately. So my sort of resolution now is get up earlier, leave earlier so I can miss the traffic jam.
I know.
Yeah.
But no, something, it happens for the best, because in my experience, that hold up has saved me from a big crash.
Yeah,
I'm not,
yeah,
and so it's a message that God is sending to you that, okay, just be patient. Traffic
yeah,
is heavy. People are held up just like you. And
yeah,
it's just that moment you stop and think. That's where it always is, just to stop and think, you get the answer.
yeah, definitely. So Krishna always rewards us in every way. Just a thought came to my mind. Many years ago, many of you may have been participating in the campaign to keep the Bhaktivedanta Manor temple open. So there was almost a situation in the late 80s and early 90s where the temple was going to be closed. And whatever we did, whatever obstacles that the devotee had faced, they went through court cases, the local court cases, the high court cases, the Supreme Court cases, the European court cases, every step they were being turned away. And you think, well, why is Krishna doing that? Of course, there's always some reactions for everything that we do. But ultimately, the benefit was so far greater that Krishna allowed the devotees the opportunity to buy land far greater than what they had already. Originally, it was only 17 acres. So normally when you drive to Bhaktivedanta Manor, where that Dhruva Maharaj is at the security gate, that was actually the boundary. So can you imagine they've got their own driveway, they've got this extra land, they can
Yeah.
have so much facilities for doing festivals. So Krishna made everyone unite together
Mm.
and have one supreme goal to make the temple much better, to make it bigger for everyone to be welcome to the temple. And many devotees, the same thing has happened in other places around the world where the temple has been closed and the devotees have prayed to Krishna. And somehow or another, Krishna provides the facilities as long as he listens, as long as your prayers are sincere, Krishna answers your prayers in whatever way possible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, even if you had had the same entrance to enter the manor,
yeah,
afterwards, if you won and they would have said yes, pass through, it would have still created a lot of anxiety. People will be tiptoeing, be scared to go in and make,
yeah,
and and then there was no parking. So you see, the end result was a lot better,
yeah.
and we were all able to go, got our own road, plenty of space to park, and it's all wonderful.
Yeah, it is absolutely wonderful. And not only that, if you think about the facilities they've had for the Goshala, that was really nice as well.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so everything. So does anybody else have any other questions or comments that they'd like to add? Any obstacles that they've had to face in their day-to-day life and how Krishna's protected them? So just to recap the verse, which Jai Shri recited, all the slokas, and Pramila Ben recited the English translation. Machita sarva durgani mat prashadat tarishyasi ata chaitvam ahankaram na shoishyasi vinakshyasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. So the last sloka I wanted to share with you was, I'm not sure if I did share this with you, but okay. This is from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 44. Bhogeshvarya prakshatanam taya parita chaitasham vyasha chatmika buddhi samado navidiyati. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. So ultimately, when we have too much attachment to sense enjoyment and material opulence, these are the cause of our obstacles in our spiritual life. They become impediments in our spiritual life. And as a result, every step we take becomes a step towards danger rather than a step towards Vaikuntha. So in this situation, a determination for devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. You may sort of feel some devotional service to a limited time, but then afterwards it only leads to frustration. I'm not able to concentrate on my rounds. I'm not able to wake up in the morning. I don't feel so enthusiastic about listening to this class because I don't have such a great buzz about this person, or these are like becomes like a hindrance in our own mind, and causes unnecessary anxiety, tension, and eventually leads to pride. And from that pride, anger arises. And from the anger, of course, as I mentioned, delusion, bewilderment of the memory, and then the intelligence is lost. And once again, one falls down into this material pool. So controlling the mind by removing the obstacles, as we know that the mind, one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends, but one who has failed to do so becomes his enemy. But as Arjuna tells Krishna, well, the mind is, obstinate and difficult to control. It's easier to control the wind than the mind. But Krishna says, for one who has control of the mind can be his best friends, but it's by regular practice, by regular sadhana, by regulated principles. One thing that I remembered, one of the things I do recall many years ago, we were in a program, and we were talking about Krishna consciousness, about following the rules and regulations of the spiritual master, or the Krishna consciousness philosophy. But then this one particular lady, she had her own sort of philosophy. She said, well, no, why should I have to follow what you're telling me? Your philosophy is your philosophy, but I feel that as long as you love Krishna, it doesn't matter what you can and what you can't do. Now, does anybody like to give an answer to that? Why that's wrong? What you can and what you can't do, depending on your own desire? It's like earlier on, we mentioned about people don't know what to do and what to do. So the reason behind that is that if people made their own rules and regulations, then there will be no commitment in their spiritual life. They may say, well, I just feel like I just want to chant 4 rounds. That's good enough for me. Of course, that's good. At least they're chanting that round. But in all life that you see that there is a system of rules. There has to be discipline, just like when we're driving a car, we have to follow the highway code. If you started driving on the wrong side road, you get somebody, holding at you. You have to follow the rules and regulations, the law of the country as well. You know what's right and what's wrong. You can't just go into somebody's house and take whatever possessions you want, because they don't belong to you. So similarly, when you want to become a devotee of Krishna, you have to follow the instructions which have been given by Krishna himself through the parampara. And that parampara, the disciplic succession, is passed from Lord Brahma, from Viveshwan, Lord Brahma, and all the generations of the saintly kings. If we don't follow these principles, then it becomes very diluted. That's why Srila Prabhupada was very, very adamant. He did not want to dilute any of his philosophy. If anything, he made it better for the whole humanity to participate. For instance, in India, you would very rarely find a lady devotee within the ashram or doing deity service or doing any sort of service. Normally, it was normally reserved for brahmachari or the men devotees. So Srila Prabhupada actually created a society, Krishna consciousness, where it wasn't just applicable to the men, but people of all generations, of all genders, of all nationalities. And that's what's unique about Krishna consciousness. So when we understand that philosophy of Krishna consciousness, it's not that because I'm an Indian that this is my religion or my philosophy. No, Krishna consciousness is universal. It's actually Sanatana Dharma, eternal knowledge. It's not even a religion. It is a way of actually serving Krishna through devotional service. So it's just a thought that came to my mind. So before I finish off,
Also, Prabhuji,
yeah,
I was thinking, Prabhupada made so many amazing changes, similar to Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu,
yeah,
because he made a lot of changes about honoring the underprivileged people, not just the well-to-do, and to spread the word to everybody. And Prabhupada followed that message and he spread it around, and he also created a space for women. So
yeah,
he should have been classed as what shall I say, incarnation.
Yeah.
of the Lord, really.
Well, actually, yeah, we would actually refer directly as an incarnation of the Lord. We would say Shakti Aveshavata, which is like an empowered being. So these are like expansions of Krishna himself, but in the form of his own devotee. Unlike you have the 10 avatars who are directly incarnations of Krishna, or you have the avatari, which is Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But
Yeah.
spiritual masters are normally considered as Shakti Aveshavata or any pure devotees as well, because,
Oh, can you say that again, please? I could write it down.
yeah, Shakti Avesh Avatar,
Avesh.
yeah, Avesha Avatar,
Avesha Avatar.
yeah,
Thank you, Prabhuji.
sure. You're in a Radha Gokulananda group, a WhatsApp group, so I'll send you a link of that particular verse or from Srimad Bhagavatam if you'd like to read it, yeah.
Which group? Sorry.
Radha Gokulananda Seva group.
I don't know if I am I?
Yeah, but anyway, I'll send it and then you'll know.
Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
there's probably
Okay.
somebody WhatsApp group as well.
Yes, there's so many I miss.
Yeah, yeah. It's just so important that when we actually understand following the spiritual master, I mentioned this quite a few times. Shaksha Darive, Nashamashta Shastra, Ukta Satata Bhavya Devasadi. The spiritual master is considered to be as good as God, because this is revealed in the scriptures and this is approved by all the senior authorities. So he never claims to be God, but the reason why they say he's good as God, because he is actually imparting that same knowledge as Krishna has imparted to his own devotees through the
Yeah.
saintly king parampara. So that's why the spiritual master never deviates at all. He doesn't concoct his own sort of philosophy or anything at all. He just explains it as from the previous acharyas, and he doesn't add anything or takes anything away. So sometimes Prabhupada was actually quite merciful because there were some difficulties in the early days, but he was still flexible about the spiritual Krishna consciousness in the early days. But as soon as time progressed and devotees were able to understand, because if you can remember that he had a very thick Indian accent and many of the newcomers had difficulty in understanding what he was saying. But as
Yeah.
the books and facilities, resources became available, they were able to read it and understand what Prabhupada was saying. And of course, it was more to do with this association and this Prabhupada's ability. He never actually forced anybody, but he actually showed love, how to become Krishna consciousness. For instance, there was a situation where there was a sannyasi who left ISKCON, and when Prabhupada found out, he said, "Oh, why did he leave?" And they said, "Oh, he wanted to get married." Prabhupada said, "Oh, there's no harm. If he wanted to get married, he could have just stepped down from his sannyas and just got married and still stay within Krishna consciousness." Now, in India, that would be considered to be like as good as committing suicide or
Mm.
considered like a very simple reaction. But Prabhupada was happy to take those offenses from the early days by his disciples. But of course, just like we say, "Oh, Lord Jesus died for our sins," but actually we should actually say, "Well, I feel, you know, you know, I feel that Jesus shouldn't have died for our sins at all. We should have suffered ourselves." But that is the nature of a devotee. He's happy to take on the burden, the responsibility of taking his devotees back to God, Krishna, back to Godhead. Yeah,
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Yes.
Krishna. So thank you very much, everyone joining. I just wanted to ask for forgiveness because I forgot to mention to ask for everybody's blessings, and also I was asked to step in last minute, so quickly put some notes together. Hopefully it made sense. If there's any questions I could ask or you want to ask, please share it on the chat group and we can try and answer that. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare
Vancha
Krishna.
Vancha
Thank you.
kalpatarubhyascha
Sindhu
kripasindhibhyacha
Devacha
Patitana
Padishana.
pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna,
Thank you.
Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
Hare
you.
Krishna.